All right, guys. Very lucky to be joined by next guest here who did another amazing job at the event this past weekend, UFC 278. Just doing an amazing job interviewing everybody, even doing shoeies with Tyson Pedro. And she's kind enough to pull over on the side of the road to join us on the way home to digest what was an absolutely incredible finish to a crazy event. Laura Sanko, thank you so much for joining us on Submission Radio. The honor and pleasure is all ours, of course. I mean, it's only been, I suppose, a number of hours since the event's finished. I just got to ask, you're sitting on the side of the road speaking to the boys, but how are you feeling looking back on the craziness that has just transpired?
It feels appropriate to be pulled over on the side of the road. I tell you what, that's very much the feeling. You know, last night when Leon knocked Kamaru out, I had this really weird delayed reaction to what had happened. Never happened to me before. I didn't, I was reacting as you normally would to a lot of the fights beforehand, especially Rockhold, Costa. And for whatever reason, when that happened, I did absolutely nothing because I was in such shock. And it wasn't shock at the outcome because I had Leon in that fight, and we can talk about that if you want, but just shock about the moment in which it happened and the way in which it happened. And yeah, I would imagine a lot of people were pulled over on the proverbial side
of their lives. Yeah.
Well, you know, it's funny. I was in between work yesterday. And so at that part I was at work, or that fight I was at work, and I was pulled over on the side of the road. Everything was cruising. I was like, let's just watch this fight instead of trying to drive and watch it at the same time. Cause it was a crazy event. I wasn't missing it for anything. And when it happened, I had the same thing. I was like, did I really just see this? It was just this weird, disbelief almost. Like, did that really just happen? I want to ask you though, you said you had Leon winning the fight initially. Why is that? Take us through that.
I shouldn't say fight, having him win it initially. I had him winning before the fight started. And I wish I could tell you it was some incredible analytical insight that I had. Although, I think all of us recognize how special Leon is in terms of, we use this term well-rounded way too much, but he is the definition of a well-rounded fighter. He truly is. But I'm not unique in recognizing that. And it wasn't that it wasn't that I had some fantastic insight that maybe some other people didn't have. It was literally just a gut feeling.
I had that same thing. I'm not going to lie. I had the same thing.
It was a gut feeling, but it was also coupled, of course, with his incredible skill set, and you can kind of take moments from the Gilbert Burns fight, moments from some of the Jorge fights, moments from some of the Covington fights, and go, you know what? I really feel like Leon would not do those things, those things. And to be honest with you, I was talking with the BT Sport guys at the weigh-ins, and I was telling them this very thing. I thought it would be a club and sub type situation. So in the first round, I was dusting my shoulders off. I was like, and then I felt, I would say stupid, but I was like, well, this is how the rest of the world thought to go. I'm not at all surprised by that. It's not like I was going to be shocked if Kamaru did what Kamaru does. But I wish I could tell you it was some amazing insight, but it was just, it was pieces of, I always go back and watch film in one sitting, and I like doing it that way because you kind of smash it all, you condense it all into a shorter period of time, and it's easier to see, changes and evolutions and little tiny openings, I guess.
And, obviously had some success in the fight, like you mentioned, towards the start. But, during the fight, Laura, there were moments there where a lot of fans, commentators, everybody thought, all right, this is Kamaru Usman's fight now. It's pretty much over. What do you make of the actual fight and the performance, maybe after that first round? Did you feel the same way? Or do you think it was a situation, maybe he was trying to land the perfect shot, taking his time? Some people maybe had the narrative that maybe Leon was kind of giving up and breaking. And, that's even coming from his coaches who in between the rounds were trying to fire him up and trying to get him to get going again.
And Daniel Cormier famously saying, we were giving him his eulogy right when that kick landed. And Dean Thomas and the whole commentary team were basically saying and analyzing and explaining why Leon is breaking. What did you make of that narrative, before the head kick landed?
that was his body language. I mean, it's hard to watch that fight and say otherwise. I will say this though, when you watch a lot of Leon's fights, I have this slight sense of frustration watching him fight, because you see the incredible skill set that he has. And then I was explaining it this week, I think on the weigh-in show, it's almost like you just get the sense that like he has another gear, and something will not allow him to quite go there. Like in the Nate fight, right? There were definitely moments in that fight where you felt like if he had just put his foot down, he could have finished Nate. And then that 5th round comes, and it's almost like he got a little bored and a little bit complacent, and he got cracked. So it's not the first time watching Leon fight where I've just been like, come on, go, right? But I agree with their assessment that I hate using the word quit or giving up, because I mean, these guys are the definition of not giving up, right? And look at the results. But there was definitely a sense of frustration, a real sense of frustration, and maybe even a sense of how on earth am I going to prevent this from history from repeating itself? And what's a fascinating and very fruitless exercise is think about, what if Herb Dean had not broken them off the cage?
Oh yeah, the old what ifs,
right? I mean, and again, it's kind of pointless to think that, but what if Herb Dean had not called for more action and broken them off the cage? But you just can't take away from what he did. He set up the perfect combination, and whether he was setting up the entire fight or not, I tend to think maybe not. However, I think in that moment he did think, you know what, I've been throwing this kick a lot to the body. Maybe we go upstairs. Bro, he, as he said in his post-fight interviews with me and with other people, that was something that his coaches and he had been working quite a bit, was throwing that same side cross head kick or body kick, and knowing that Kamaru would slip. And it's just crazy how the world in this sport spins on just a needle of an axis. Like, I tried to, it's so hard to articulate, but this is the only sport I can think of, even more so than boxing, that is truly played just on this razor's edge. And it's frustrating at times, and I'm sure it's very frustrating for Kamaru and his camp. And I'm sure it's been frustrating on the other hand for Leon in other instances. It's like fighting is designed to show you who is the superior man or woman, right? Who would beat whom up in real life. Like, we're trying to get as close to that as possible. And what's interesting is that in this sport where we have all these different factors and constraints and whatnot, it's almost like you'd have to have everyone fight 5 times. Yeah. To really know. To really know. And, best out of 5, right? But that's of course a reality that's never going to exist, and it's why this sport creates these incredible moments that we all love.
Unless you're Brendan Moreno and Figueiredo, they'll fight 10 times.
Yes. Yeah, they might actually get close to fighting 5 times for sure.
Yeah, I think it's crazy. It's also crazy how people compile lists and do all these breakdowns. Then in the blink of an eye, all that gets thrown out the window. Something happens in the octagon. It's just an insane sport. But I gotta, and by the way, you mentioned it. Like, he threw the combo, he landed the shots. All power to Leon. He is the champion. I just wanted to take it to Kamaru Usman's side. Obviously, he was dominating a lot of the fight. He was on his way to winning. What do you make of him sort of making that mistake and falling for Leon's combo, leaning into that kick, and ultimately losing the title? I imagine, most fighters have been there. Everybody's sort of made a mistake in training and sparring and in fighting, and everybody has basically slipped into a shot like that at some point in their training or fighting career. But just the time that it happened and the way that it happened, absolutely unfortunate. Leading into that fight as well, Laura, Kamaru did seem a little bit too comfortable to just kind of stay there on the outside with Leon, and a lot of that movement sort of dissipated a little bit. I guess he felt like the fight was almost over and he had kind of won already.
I think it's hard not to see it that way. And what I'm sure will haunt him for a while is that, the longer a fight goes, the more you introduce factors that are out of your control. Every second you're in the octagon with someone, you're introducing more and more risk to the fight ending not in your favor for both people. There's a lot of randomness and a lot of things outside of your control, which is why it's so important to control the things that you can. Number one for me being cardio. But that's a different discussion. Point being, if where you have the most control of the fight is in the grappling, you have to. It would not have been coasting. I don't think it would have been coasting for him to continue to grapple in that last round of the fight. It would have been the safer thing to do for sure. But when you're in such a high stakes situation, we put so much emphasis on he's going to continue to go for it. And that's the right thing to do. That's what we cheer for, right? As guys are he's going to lay it on the line to the bell. Man, but what would you do in that instance? There's millions of dollars and legacy and records and all of these things that can be snatched from you and were snatched from him in an instant.
And the fight wasn't really there was a lot of pressure on him. I feel like, some fans weren't happy in the crowd. He's kind of a lot of people see him as the pound for pound guy. I feel like he was in there kind of also trying to entertain, also trying to deal with people unhappy. They're also trying to, like you mentioned, and defend his legacy.
You come off a knockout like he had against Jorge, and you want that. I mean, it's extra shiny when you knock someone out, right? You want that adulation. You want that praise. You want that highlight reel. No one's going to put a highlight reel together of him controlling people against the side of the octagon. So it's hard not to chase those moments when you know that you are capable of achieving them. And I don't know. I do think he made an error, obviously, in not looking to grapple again. I mean, but he was grappling right before Herb broke them up. So it's just crazy. It's just crazy that it's just the whole situation. So I love this sport for so many reasons, but one of the reasons I love it is that, to me, this fight it's like a microcosm of Leon's entire career, right? He starts out with so much promise, clearly, oh wow, he's really doing some cool stuff. And then oh, well, this isn't very exciting and this isn't going well. And, all the cancellations and all of the just not getting his due. And then, turns on a dime.
100%. Yeah, I also think with Usman, he had all the criticism in the past of him being boring and the memes of 30% Usman, and now he's getting these highlight reel knockouts. You got to think that's got to kind of weigh on him as well and affect some of the decisions that he makes, and like you mentioned, the legacies that he's shaping. And then also heading into the fight, I did think if Leon's going to get him, it's going to be somewhere on the feet. And I didn't think it was going to be a finish. I just thought maybe he's going to dominate him over a few rounds and, rack up enough strikes to kind of get him over the edge. And when we spoke to Dan Hardy, I wanted to ask, do you think this could be a situation where we've seen time and time again wrestlers falling in love with their striking and it costs them? And Dan, being the brilliant analyst that he is, explained why he thinks Usman's going to be fine on the feet. And I kind of forgot about that a little bit. And now looking in the fight, it's hard not to look at that and factor it in some way. And also, I wonder how this is going to affect Usman when he returns. If he is going to be, some people, they get caught like that. They become very gun shy and they're never the same, or do we, see the return of a more grappling heavy, a more safer Usman? There's so many factors. Even with GSP, he is always going to be compared to GSP. I wonder how this affects his legacy now, because people were looking at him as almost a surefire, successor to George St. Pierre. And now a lot of that has been undone. And GSP had a similar thing where, he was so exciting and dominant. And then he got caught a few times, then he came back and people criticized him for his, safer wrestling heavy style. How do you think Usman bounces back mentally after something like this? And also, who are you favoring in the rematch?
Well, it's hard not to think that this isn't going to affect him at all, right? I mean, this is the first time he's been knocked out. It's his first loss. It's head kicks are particularly difficult because clearly you didn't see it coming. So how do you train I mean, there are ways, but like the idea, like how do you train for stuff that you aren't going to see coming, right? I do think that we see him rely a little bit more on his grappling, but I don't know that he'll be drastically different, you know. And I think the analogy with GSP is perfect, because I don't think that I don't think you have to have perfection to have greatness. I think that that's a real difficult task in this sport, and the people who achieve perfection like Khabib, there's a real sense that they left a lot on the table, and I wouldn't want to feel like I left a lot on the table when I was done with this sport if I was one of these guys competing at this level. So I don't think, if he can come back and continue and regain the championship and continue to defend it, and then maybe, you know, go up, maybe Izzy somehow in some crazy world. I'm not saying I wish that some crazy middleweight champion, you know, maybe he goes up there and does. I do believe he can get back in that GOAT conversation. I don't think one strike, one little mistake does not take away the legacy, but it does take a minute to kind of regain and rebuild. And in terms of, you know, your question about who I would favor in the rematch, I think it's going to be a much more interesting fight than this one, because I think both of them are going to be different. I really don't think that this was Leon's greatest performance. Like, I don't think he looked good at all, to be honest with you. I shouldn't say good at all. He looked great in moments, but normally much more consistent in a fight than that. And I do think the altitude got to him. Maybe there was a combination of an adrenaline dump given the stakes in this fight. I'm telling you, that altitude is a real thing, and I know it for weeks, and I'm sure somewhere on Google will tell you that that's long enough to acclimate. It's different than living in Denver. And consistently training at an even higher elevation than that.
Oh yeah, it was absolutely huge. I mean, you factor that into the finish of the fight as well, the altitude and the fact that the guys were that much more tired. You mentioned how important cardio is, and we know how much of a factor that is into actually somebody finishing someone. It's absolutely huge. So another thing going against Usman and Leon Edwards in that fight, and we saw that with Luke Rockhold and Paulo Costa. Just before we finish up on this fight, though, I got to ask. And by the way, the GSP thing I agree with as well. But, you know, he lost to Matt Serra and then he bounced back. So who knows? You know, legacies are rewritten when guys can come back. A lot of fans forget about those losses depending on what fighters come back and look like after. But I got to ask, you know, Khamzat Chimaev, obviously he's fighting Nate Diaz next. Nate's had some miracle situations in the octagon. So, you know, I don't want to discount him, but likely Khamzat's going to win that one. Are you thinking that this could be the next fight for Leon? Khamzat Leon, are you thinking it could be Jorge Masvidal somehow doing a quick turnaround, or do you believe it's going to likely be an immediate rematch with Usman? I think that they're looking at March, you know, at Wembley or something crazy like that for that rematch if that happens.
And also, if it, I mean, I'm going to assume it's going to be the immediate rematch. What do you think that happens with Khamzat? Because people kind of thought if you win here, you get the next shot, nice and easy matchmaking. But now, I mean, we could be waiting a while before, you know, that potentially happens, which would add fights to Khamzat's near future, in theory.
I do think it's going to be the rematch. I think it'd be, it would take an injury or something, you know, some big X factor to derail that. And I think that, I don't know, I don't think that that's a horribly inappropriate period of time to wait either. I would want Kamaru to have ample time to heal and rest up from a concussion like that. And I think Leon will be happy to wait to be able to main event a show back in the UK. I would love for them to go to Wembley. I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, I don't know.
There's just no way to have MMA outdoors, especially when you're talking about England.
Yeah. It's like bloody Melbourne with the weather. Raining all the time.
This isn't San Diego where like it's perfect all the time. This is, you know, it's kind of known for having a lot of rain over there. So I don't see it happening. I wish it could. That'd be amazing if they could somehow figure out how to throw a tarp over that place. That'd be pretty cool. But no, that'd be amazing. And in terms of Khamzat, I wouldn't mind having, you know, for him to have, if he gets past Nate, I wouldn't mind having him have another match between now and then. It's only going to build the ultimate fight and provide more opportunity for him to really prove himself out and just create a bigger storyline when he does get a chance to fight for a belt, if he does.
Yeah. Well, I know a lot of people would be getting excited right now, like in the division. We'll see what happens in this rematch. But if Leon can retain, you got to think Jorge Masvidal chomping at the bit. There's already a storyline. The path for another title shot for Jorge was looking, kind of dim. But now, he's back in there. Colby Covington, obviously with the legal issues at the moment that are keeping him out of the cage. But man, you got to think that guy will be right back in there. A lot of people would be, very excited. Just quickly, sorry to do this to you, Laura. Something else to get excited about. Obviously, Father's Day around the corner here in Australia. And our good friends at Manscaped are here to ensure that all the father figures out there are looking daddy material this June. Manscaped's why am I saying June? Sorry, September. What am I talking about? September is when Father's Day is here, September 4th in Australia. The Performance Package 4.0, which includes their signature Lawnmower 4.0, is the perfect bundle to tackle any and all old man hair from head to toe. You know the ones, no one likes it. This right here is no dad joke. Treat your dad and yourself to join the 6 million men worldwide and trust Manscaped with their exclusive offer. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code submission at manscaped.com. Isn't that right, Dennis?
Yeah, man. Get that Manscaped into your life. And congratulations to all our friends who made some serious cash this past weekend with our friends at MyBookie. They used the code word submission. We've been getting messages about this all weekend for 100% match deposit. So how does that work, you guys ask? It means when you guys put down that deposit, MyBookie will match it for you 100%. Make sure you use that code word submission for the upcoming fights right around the corner in UFC 279, Khamzat Chimaev versus Nate Diaz. Of course, some big ones, UFC 280 as well. MyBookie, your only place to go for all your betting needs, and the code word submission, Cass.
Yeah, and before we talk Luke Rockhold and Paulo Costa, which I'm dying to talk about, we're talking about the rematch possibly being done in the UK, maybe not at Wembley, but maybe at the O2. If you want to fly there, what better way to do it than get some cheap tickets, cheap airfares. Airfares a little bit all over the place at the moment. Some cheap, some expensive. If you use a VPN like NordVPN, you can change your geolocation and you can actually affect the prices and get cheaper tickets. The same exact flight, but it is a different price depending on where you live and where you're buying these tickets from. So change your geolocation with NordVPN. You can do the same thing for things like Netflix. You can get Mexican Netflix. It's the same thing, but if your computer thinks you're buying it from Mexico, you pay less money, and all sorts of other things that you can get cheaper from all around the world with NordVPN. Also, no speed throttling, no excess buffering when you're watching your favorite shows on Netflix. Plus, you get access to all sorts of different Netflix in different geolocations with NordVPN. Isn't that right, Dennis?
That's right, man. Keep all your subscriptions, travel around the world and do your thing. Going to New Zealand, and I was able to hook up the family over there with the New Zealand VPN discount. They bought it for the Australian price. Money was saved. Huge discounts to be saved as well at NordVPN right now. Well, you guys could get your NordVPN plan with a huge discount plus, ready for this, 4 months for free. And by the way, it's completely risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. Just go to nordvpn.com/submission or click the link in the description below. Try it risk-free and change your life forever thanks to our friends at Nord. But Laura, speaking of people changing their lives forever, what about Paulo Costa and that return performance against Luke Rockhold? I mean, we didn't know what to expect from Paulo Costa going in here. We didn't even know if he was going to make weight. And there he is. He showed up. He ended up pulling out the victory. He ended up making that weight. What did you make of that crazy fight between him and Luke Rockhold?
I actually loved it. I know a lot of people that didn't, but I loved it. And not for the normal reasons I love watching a fight of that level. It was sloppy. It was super sloppy. But there's a part of me that loves the rawness of that. Like, yeah. Watching Luke in this fight felt extremely cathartic.
Mm-hmm.
It was like watching someone exercise some demons that they have been holding in for a long time. And I don't know, you kind of got the sense that he just needed to go out there and he needed to punch someone in the face and he needed to just get it all out. And it was not at all the fight that I was expecting, but it was a lot of fun to watch. And I'm fascinated to know about his preparation because, round one, like as soon as I noticed it even before they mentioned it on commentary, because as soon as someone starts playing with their mouthpiece like that, and like kind of taking it in and out with their tongue, you know that they're having a hard time breathing, and it's either from gas or it's from blood coming down the back of their throat. And in his case, it was both. And as sloppy as it was, and as like, if it had been under different circumstances, I feel like I'd be kind of critical of how he looked, but somehow it turned into something like really inspiring and almost heartwarming. I mean, I know that sounds crazy, but it's like he just needed to go out there and get it all out. And he did, and watching him yell, fuck you.
Yeah.
As he's like nearly on death's door. I mean, I don't, unless you've ever been in a situation where you have literally felt like you were about to die for a cardio reason, like that, what he experienced is every fighter's biggest fear. It's not getting punched. It's not, well, maybe it's getting knocked out, but like the physical pain that you go through in fighting is nothing compared to the feeling that your body is about to, yes, that you are helpless and that your body is betraying you and you can't do a flipping thing about it. And to see him, blood pouring out his mouth, he's like, his face was almost distorted because he had his mouth guard all twisted so he could breathe, and still, like I said, saying fuck you and throwing these huge shots and trying to end the fight. It was inspiring in a way, even though it was sloppy. I loved it.
I mean, we mentioned the altitude before, but I just wanted to bring it up again. Are you a little bit disappointed that we saw this fight in Salt Lake City because of this altitude? Because it looked like this is the fight that really got affected by it. I mean, Luke Rockhold showed a ton of heart, but man, those guys were very tired.
Very tired. I mean, for a fighter at that level to be leaning over, putting his hands on his knees, I mean, that's a rough place to be. And early, like I think he did that early in the second round, if I remember right. I definitely wish that this had somehow been at sea level.
Vegas.
Well, yeah, when you're muscled up like that too, for Costa, although I think Costa was in pretty good shape, it definitely still affected him. I don't know if either of them got out there early enough to really acclimate, and man, it's a real thing. It's a real thing.
Well, Rockhold's camp went for like 6 months, and the guy was in incredible shape. There's nothing else he could have done outside of getting there earlier. So it's just insane how much of an effect it has on certain fighters.
It really is. It really is. I think people kind of, they think that they're accounting for it, but it's really difficult to account for. And it's definitely, you need more than a few weeks. You really do.
Man, I'll tell you what, I was so, you mentioned about being emotional. I was so emotional when Rockhold retired. I like even welled up a little bit. And I you kind of live vicariously through Luke Rockhold in this instance. I know people like to rip on Luke Rockhold and he's become somewhat of a meme at times, but I think even the most staunch, anti-Rockhold people kind of got won over in that fight because, like you said, he just gave it as his all. It wasn't the perfect retirement in the sense of like, say, GSP winning the belt, going out as champion, which is kind of exactly what he wanted to do. He wanted to fight Israel and then ride off into the sunset. It was like a pretty rough fight. Definitely not his best showing. So far removed from the Rockhold in 2015 who won the belt. But man, like how can you not like that? Everybody's been in tough situations and not everybody's persevered and pushed through. And he did. He left everything in that octagon. And, it wasn't about winning or losing, but to see him hurting like that and, crying with Joe and he's like, man, I'm just fucking old. Oh man, that was so painful to see because you could see he was capable of more and he wanted to do more. But kind of like the Tim Kennedy fight where he was looking good until he didn't. He was just like, dude, my body just betrayed me and I couldn't do it. I am curious what you think his legacy will be in MMA because it's like, and I've always loved Rockhold, but even I find myself kind of like going back and forth. Rockhold's legacy, I feel sometimes is like, oh, people wanted more, right? He started off that title reign and people thought, oh man, here comes the era. And then it was cut so short. And then he had all those injuries and so many fights canceled and so many things that you wanted to see that didn't happen. And by the time he came back, it's like, the time had passed him by. But then you think about it and you're like, well, hang on a second. Strikeforce middleweight champion, UFC middleweight champion. He's got incredible guys on his roster. It's almost like, well, he kind of did everything. So what do you think his legacy will be in MMA, Laura?
He will continue to be one of the greatest middleweights. It's the people that only know, it's the people that became fans post 2014 that don't really understand who Luke Rockhold is. And you can't take away, I mean, his legacy was built earlier in his career, and that can't be erased. It can't be undone. And I think that that's what the people who know will always point to that. And that's what you should point at, because the Luke, that we saw the last few years, there's just a lot of sense of frustration. So I feel like that word cathartic is what keeps coming to mind when I think about that performance, because it's like the frustration of not being able to live up to the expectations, the frustration of the injuries, the frustration of people saying that you have a glass jaw and a lot of people not liking you, whatever it is. It's just that it felt like he was just purging those demons in this performance. And there's something really beautiful and humanizing about watching someone struggle and watching someone make it to the end and give their all and put it all out there. And I will tell you what, man, I haven't really been a big Luke Rockhold fan. I'm a fan of his fighting style, and he's one of the best grapplers this division's ever seen. But I haven't always been a big fan of him. For the first time ever, to be honest with you, I really enjoyed Luke Rockhold as a person this week. And I know that sounds weird because everybody's like, oh, he's acting so weird, he's acting angry. And it's not that I agree with the things that he was putting on the table, but it was the most real I'd ever seen him be, in his interviews, like really opening up about personal struggles and doubt. And, even though the real emotion he was putting out there was kind of like this bitterness and anger, there was no like, I got to be cool and I got to be this like super handsome guy and I got to be this alpha male, and like, he wasn't trying to be cool anymore. And I loved that about it. And to me, that makes for like a perfect ending, because I don't know, it was really him, and he gave it his all. And now he can like put a bow on it and be proud, really, really proud of what he achieved both in Strikeforce and in the UFC. For
sure. And even like to show glimpses of the old Rockhold with the crazy tornado kicks, like that was incredible. And like there were times where he was exhausted and he still threw these maneuvers that sapped him even more, those crazy kicks. So it's like you saw like a condensed vintage Rockhold, just an older version. It's like an old Jedi coming back for one more fight. And also, you mentioned the chin, and that's another thing that has kind of plagued him as far as fan and analyst criticisms. And he went in there and he kind of he took some big shots. And it's kind of like GSP came in and got a finish and kind of proved to the people, hey, I can finish. You thought I couldn't, but I can. And in the same way, Luke Rockhold came and it was like, hey man, I can go. And he had a war. People thought if he's going to win or lose, it's not going to be in a war. But he went back and forth and took some big shots. And I have to say, like, people don't understand this, but man, we met Rockhold in 2014 and he was so nice to us, and we were, just kind of starting out. And like, if I look back at us in 2014, I wouldn't give us the time of day, but he always did. And then, years later, he was still nice to us. And that's why he's been like a regular guy on the show. And I don't know why. I don't get it. Sometimes I say to Dennis, like, why would Rockhold give us the time of day? But he always has, and that's one of the reasons why he's been on the show so many times. And that's one of the things that I have a lot of respect for Rockhold, because it's just something that you don't see, in his interviews. So I just wanted to sort of get that out there. He's a really good dude behind the scenes.
Yeah. We do get people in the comments a lot, Laura, going, oh, Luke Rockhold. But actually, behind the scenes, he's actually a really cool dude. And I think he's a little bit misunderstood. I just wanted to also say, I am curious, though. Obviously, we had the altitude that plagued him in this fight. He showed a ton of heart. I know he mentioned how he was old, but I don't know, am I the only one here that feels like I want to see him maybe come back one more time and have one more fight? Like, I feel like this wasn't a great circumstance for him to make a comeback. He was away for such a long time. He had a lot of rust. He was fighting one of the top guys in the division. He was fighting at a terrible altitude and didn't really get to show what he had to offer because of that as well. I don't know. Is this really the right time to call it, do you think, Laura? Or would you have liked to see him maybe have one more crack at it, possibly against someone not ranked in the top 5 and possibly not in the middle of a mountain somewhere next to an old guy with a goat.
I mean, you're 100% right on all of those circumstances, but I don't see it, and I actually think that for all of the reasons that we've been discussing, this is like a weirdly good way for him to wrap things up, and like baptizing Costa in that like fuck you blood, like.
What was your reaction when you saw that in the back? Were you like, okay, well, this is interesting? Like,
that's like, this is gonna make me sound like a psychopath, but like that's the MMA that I love.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Just bleed,
like,
literally.
Is love. Like I love moments where it's like you can see the bloodlust in these people, and maybe it's because I've had like this teeny tiny taste of it in my own life, that like there is a high, even though he was clearly gonna lose the fight, there is a high in the moment like that when you are on top of someone. And I've never rubbed my blood into someone's eyes before, but I would if I could.
Well, that's good to know before we meet you. We can't let you get close, Laura. We can't let you get close. No. You know, I just wanted to, I agree as well. It's one of those things where it's like he's defeated, but he's still kind of like, F you. Like, I'm not going out like this. I'm showing you my heart. And there's been so many times in fights where we've seen fighters just kind of give up and not sort of show that when they aren't even that far down. And then you see this guy on the ground showing his heart. I was going to mention, it reminds me a little bit of the movie The Warrior, you know, with Tom Hardy and Joel Edgerton, where at the end of the fight, it's kind of like Tom Hardy's demons get exercised in this loss. And it's like this emotional moment with Nick Nolte. And, you know, I always well up in that moment as well. And that was very similar to me, that moment where, like you mentioned, like things get exercised. It's kind of like you let go of a bunch of demons in that moment. I saw a lot of parallels there.
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful thing. And for that reason, I think it's a better ending than if by chance he had like maybe eked out kind of a boring decision over Costa. To me, lost. This is better than that. And I wouldn't want to run the risk of like him having another fight and having just like a forgettable fight. This was not forgettable.
Yeah, 100%. Speaking of unforgettable, Paulo Costa and the secret juice that he's carrying around. You've been pulled over on the side of the road for like 1,000 years, Laura. We will let you go, but just I want to end on this. What do you think would be next, ideally, for Paulo Costa? Because obviously, you know, he's had his ups and downs with the UFC. It looked like at one point he was trying to get fired in that Marvin Vettori fight week. Now he's speaking pretty highly of the UFC. It seems like he's open to, you know, contract negotiations, but it's all going to come down to the money, essentially. And then you got Jake Paul sort of chirping at him. What do you think happens with Paulo Costa next?
I think he stays, and I think I'd like to see him fight Jared Cannonier, maybe.
Ooh.
I think that'd be a really fun fight and an appropriate fight. They've not fought before, and he's in that tricky situation, of course, where he's fought and had a bad loss against the champion, but there's some interesting things happening in that division, and you never know. I mean, we learned that last night. You never know what's going to change in the landscape of a division, even with an incredibly dominant champion. It just takes one split second for the world to turn on to axis. So I would like to see him stay in the UFC. I think he will, and my pick would be Cannonier.
You know, it's fascinating. I think Cannonier might be fighting Strickland, but both of those guys would be fantastic. But no. Strickland, or as well, would be a fantastic fight. But it's fascinating to me to see this because we're in a new age of MMA where there's so much money on the table if you play your cards right. And for a guy like Paulo Costa, there could be so much money in the potential Jake Paul fight. I'm also fascinated to see how this new management with his partner goes as well, because I love a focused Paulo Costa. And if he's focused, I feel like the world is his oyster. But then we've seen what happens when he's also unfocused and has issues in his personal life or whatever leading into a fight. So I just really hope we see that this version of Paulo Costa next time when he comes out, because I love seeing him in shape and ready to go. But guys, she was doing shoeies with Tyson Pedro, flying back home, doing an amazing job. Of course, you can follow her at Laura_Sanko on Instagram and Twitter. Laura, we really appreciate your time. I mean, it was a historic event, so we had to get a historic person on to discuss it. And we appreciate you pulling over we hope that not being towed right now secretly and not telling us, and we appreciate you coming on the show. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you always for having me. I always love it when you guys give me a call. And this was one, man, there's no way I'd miss talking about UFC 78. So thank you guys.
The banter with you is always incredible. Thank you so much for your time, Laura. See you later. Bye.
Have a safe drive. Thank you so much.